Hey guys, June here, and this is going to be a really short supplemental video to talk about the most recent update to Revolution that allows it to activate Threshold and Ultimate abilities. This update offered a really substantial increase to the amount of DPS that we can do when fully AFK, but it involves changing our bars around a little bit under those circumstances. Before we get started though, I have to make it abundantly clear that this is not a substitute for full manual play, and even if you're one of the many players who use Revolution for bossing, the way that we've talked about previously where Revolution activates your basic abilities for you and you manually activate your thresholds and ultimates is going to give you vastly better DPS than any techniques from this video. There's simply no way to build an ability bar so that the new improved version of Revolution will consistently do the best DPS rotation, and so this should only be used in strictly AFK gameplay circumstances. So with that said, let's get started looking at an actual bar, and for the sake of this video I'm just going to assume that you've watched the basic DPS videos that are earlier in this DPS for Dummies playlist. In those videos we talked about some of the basic principles of DPS, including the fact that your objective is to get to your damage boosting ultimate and use it as quickly as possible and as often as possible, which is precisely why we have it in this very first highest priority slot on this new Revolution bar. Immediately after that we have our two high-hitting thresholds, which for this example are going to be Assault and Hurricane. For dual-wield melee they would be Assault and Destroy, for magic they would be Wild Magic and Asphyxiate, and for ranged they would be Snapshot and Rapid Fire. Now I can already anticipate you guys asking why only the two strongest thresholds when there are several others that are strong enough to justify using. The reason for this is that Revolution isn't going to be selective about using those abilities in the same fashion that you would if you were doing them manually. If we were to try to include all of the useful thresholds for any attack style, Revolution is simply going to rotate through them so frequently that it's never going to build up the required adrenaline to use your damage boosting ultimate. Obviously this would lead to a massive reduction in your outgoing DPS, and so this is why we limit ourselves to the two strongest thresholds. Behind those thresholds we're simply going to include our basic abilities mostly in accordance with what we talked about in the basic DPS videos, with one exception. If we have some kind of an ability like Fury or Concentrated Blast that requires us to use a manual input in order to use the ability properly, we'll actually want to move that ability all the way to the right and slide the other basic abilities to the left to compensate. Since we're planning this bar to be fully AFK, we're not going to be doing the manual input that makes these abilities useful, and their overall outgoing damage is going to be weaker and their priority position lower as a result. Apart from this small change, the priority order here is going to be exactly the same as we discussed in the basic DPS videos, or you could reference the Revolution page on the RuneScape wiki for some optimized variants depending on whether or not you've unlocked certain abilities. That's really all there is to it, and this orientation is going to give us the best outgoing DPS against a single target. Just as a quick reference, this is what a roughly comparable ability bar would look like for magic or ranged. There's also one other type of action bar build that's great for using with this new Revolution system, and is great for dealing damage against groups of enemies. The format here is also remarkably simple. In these first few slots we're including all of our strong AoE ultimates and thresholds. These are where the vast majority of our AoE DPS comes from, and so we want to make sure that they're always the highest priority. In the fourth slot we have Berserk as a means of outletting our adrenaline, assuming all of the prior stuff is on cooldown. This of course is going to double our damage and give us even better outgoing DPS when all of our high damage AoE abilities come back off cooldown after that first cycle. After that we're simply dumping in our basic abilities in exactly the same priority order as before. This type of ability bar is great for AFK tasks like Abyssal Demons or Corrupted Workers and things that you conventionally do with a scythe. The major downside here is that this doesn't actually translate that well to magic or ranged. With ranged, obviously, you could just use the previous action bar that we developed and just add in mechanized Chinchampas to turn it into an AoE action bar. For magic, however, a very large part of your AoE damage comes from the ability Detonate, and because of the way that ability works, it wasn't formatted to work with Revolution Plus at all. You can still make a partly AoE-focused magic bar by including things like Chain, Dragon Breath, Corruption Blast, and Tsunami at the very front of your bar alongside Sunshine, but in order to get really good results, you still have to put in at least enough manual effort to use Detonate. I hope this video helped you guys adapt to the new Revolution updates and get your bars set up for some nice AFK Slayer. This was a very widely requested video, so I just want to apologize that it took almost 2 weeks to get it out. As usual, if you've got a question or a really cool action bar you want to share, drop them in the comment section down below. Big thanks to all of you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.